Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. I have with me today a returning co-host, longtime pre-owner mastermind, pursuit of ownership, visionary, and good friend, Andrew Clingan, Dr. Andrew Clingan. How's it going, Andrew?
Richard, it's good to see you, man. I don't get enough FaceTime with you these days.
No, not at all. And man, your sultry southeastern accent on the podcast, we've been missing that for a long time.
Absolutely.
Yes. So it's so good to have you back, man. We've done updates to your practice. I think one of the first episodes in the reboot was kind of an update of your practice. And now there's been some episodes that have been pulled from the reboot, and I can't really talk about that too much, but yours now is, I think, even more prominent in the early Shared Practices 2.0. And if people are interested, they can go to the archives. They can hear your full story. And we're not going to go in that today, but just briefly tell us, where do you practice, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, that story has been told a million times. And so, yeah, go find all the old TPO articles of me and my trusty right-hand guy, Steven. So just to quickly recap, I think that's helpful. About 2 years ago, graduated dental school. I had been what I would consider a long-term SP intern. And so what that meant was, as a dental student, I felt weird saying it at the time, but now I'm just comfortable acknowledging, and calling a spade a spade. I was a dental student who knew more about practice management than probably 99% of dental students in the country, because I had been rubbing shoulders with Richard and Alex and George and Suzanne and the whole crew for 3 years of my dental school experience.
And honestly, you could say you knew more about practice management than probably 80% of dentists in the country, especially considering the non-owners and the owners who are longtime owners who didn't have the tools and the podcasts and the coaching that we have today.
I knew all the strategy. I knew the textbook answers. I knew the analytics backwards and forwards. I didn't have any of the real world experience. And I'll say that's worth something. Being 2 years in now, there's some things that you don't know what you don't know, and you can't figure out until you're in the situation. That's the beauty of entrepreneurship. But yeah, I was this guy who had all this information and angst and still thought he was going to wait 2 years to buy a practice. I envision buying a practice now, right? That's the advice we give people. Right. Had this opportunity to buy a practice that was very, very undervalued. And I saw it, knew it was a big fixer-upper. With the advice of people at SP around me, I didn't make this decision in a vacuum and my own plans and all that. I had the counsel of very wise people around me. Yeah, we decided to buy it straight out of school. And so, that journey's been well documented. Did that. We knew that this was a practice that had the patient flow of a productive solo plus to a super solo, while doing the numbers of a productive solo, just really a solo. And so we got in there, got diagnosis right, re-updated the place, all of those things. In a year we doubled it, doubled the value and the revenue in first year. And so now we're coming in second year. Things are much better now because there's not necessarily a baby dentist leading the charge. It's a young dentist, but not a baby dentist.
Right.
It doesn't take me 2 hours to prep a crown any longer. Those were great days. Got the right team in place, and infrastructures have gotten better with some of the real world lessons. I said, I know all this about practice management, but what I really didn't know a lot about? Hiring and firing and interviewing well on the front end,
screening
and leading and screening. These are things that it's hard to teach until you have some real life experience, right? Yeah. And so, the last year or so has just been all about trying to optimize and build the platform and the foundation for future growth. And so that's been what I've been up to the last 12 months. I still am involved at Shared Practices, a little bit behind the scenes and some various stuff, but it's been head down working in my practice, working to optimize it, working to get a good team around me. We're at a place finally where we've opened up capacity, and we're really focusing on driving new patient growth and everything that comes with that. And so that's a little bit of my story. That's where I'm at now and what I've been up to.
Okay. So
it's a lot.
It's a lot. And the amazing thing is people are going to get to hear quite a bit from you at our Pathway to Ownership event that's coming up here in July in Scottsdale, Arizona. I think, is it the 25th, 26th?
That sounds right. Yeah. I was looking at those dates today. Yeah. So really excited to speak at that event. I'm going to be lecturing alongside George there, who is like the godfather of all this. Right. So it's going to be a really informative few days. I think with just the SP approach to buying practices and finding these undervalued practices. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. That, along with my shared experience of doing that the last few years in real time in the current market, right? Like, the market for acquisitions these days is not the same that it was 5 years ago when we were recording TPO for the first time. And so I think that's going to be really informative and really good for dentists and dental students and people early on in their careers, because, you know, our mantra that we always preach here is early practice ownership. And, you know, for most people, that's probably not going to be right out of school, but you never know. You might find your place yourself in the right place at the right time, like I did. And because I had got that mentorship and that education through shared practices and been with them for years, when the opportunity presented itself, I was ready to jump on it.
Yeah.
And that's really what we push people for. Like, hey, maybe I'm not ready for ownership yet. That's great. You're not ready for ownership, but you got to start getting ready. And so that's a little bit about what we'll talk about today. But yeah, really looking forward to that event. As you can tell, I'm passionate about this stuff. It's fun for me. Private practice is still alive and well in dentistry. The big, corporate dental chains is never going to be as good as I am in my location. They can't even touch me. And it's fun saying that.
No, it's amazing. Well, and that was the theme we discussed before this episode of, what if we took baby dentist Andrew Clingan, but we transplanted your knowledge of today back into knowledge and experience. So this is like your practice burns down or you have to move out of state. So you're not baby dentist Andrew. Let's take 2-year mature dentist Andrew, and say you've got to move. Hey man, we're kicking you out of your practice. You got to go to a different state, start over. What would you do differently? And what would you do the same? And, you just mentioned, as a dental student, you armed yourself to the nines with practice management information. You learned, you did the reps, you podcasted about this. I think you and I both can agree, it's really hard for us, being entrepreneurially inclined, to understand dentists and dental students who don't consume this stuff, who don't arm themselves with the right education. So that being said, that wouldn't change. I know that, and you know that, binge listening to podcasts, practice management stuff, books, getting your hands on all this, learning everything you can learn without doing it yourself. Mm-hmm. Then, one specific thing, I guess, for the new grad, knowing what you know now, would you buy straight out of school, or would you recommend most people? Maybe you would, or do you think most people? And also, with the amount of cash on hand that you did it, would you make different recommendations around cash on hand going into practice ownership?
Yeah, so that's an entire podcast by itself, Richard. I'll answer it in one short word. Yes, yep. I would. I think for me, I'll touch on a few things you asked. One, the cash part to me doesn't worry me as much, but everybody's life situations are different. My story was, and I've shared this on the podcast, I was a dental student living off my wife's income. Both of us, we were used to like a very low standard of living. And so it was no stress on me at all to jump into a practice where I didn't really take an income for 6 months, the first 6 months I was there. And guess what? Our standard of living didn't change. Actually, I take that back, Richard. I paid myself like $2,000 to $3,000 a month.
There we go. Look at you.
Yeah, I mean, and I was making less than a school teacher, and nothing against school teachers, but obviously dentist income and school teacher income are very different.
Yep.
And it was still great because guess what? I had $3,000 more a month than we used to have. So we went on like 2 more date nights a month. It was like life was good, other than the crippling anxiety from clinical dentistry, which we'll get to later. But yeah, I would go back. I think the thing you really have to understand, though, and people have to be honest, is where you stand in your skill set, in your knowledge. Once again, I don't ever want to come across as I'm the only expert out there or anything like that. But the reality of the situation was I really knew what I was doing behind the practice management side of things. I did. And that's what saved me in all the other areas that I didn't know what I was doing. Clinical dentistry for 3 to 4 months, I did not know what I was doing. I came from a dental school where I did 10 times as many crowns as some other dental students. I still did not know what I was doing, right?
Yeah.
I had leadership experience in running a small business and other things. Leading, I still didn't know what I was doing. I found I'm a very poor communicator, Richard. I found that I'm not good at hiring and all that. And so had I stepped into that not knowing what I was doing from the practice management side, it would have gotten bad. And really what saved me was I was able to identify this kind of diamond in the rough opportunity from so there's so many things that I optimized just by making some administrative decisions that bought me some time to get my other skills and the other knowledge under my belt, if that makes sense. And so I think the thing I would say is anybody can do it, but you have to be honest with yourself about the amount of expertise you have in that area. And if you don't have it, I'm not saying you can't do it, but you got to find out a way to get it. Like, if you went to dental school and graduated, you're smart, okay? There's nobody who's not capable of it. But if you don't know what you don't know, you have to kind of figure out what you're going to do to close that gap. If that's with consulting, going to courses, whatever it is, you have to have a plan for that. If there's not a clear, like very clear thing, early ownership right out of school, I would advise people to stay away from.
Yeah. Okay. So clinically for you, the cash position comes down to, can you live if your practice doesn't make any money?
Yeah.
And that is what having $50,000 to $100,000 in the bank solves. You've got another source of income. Your overhead, your personal lifestyle, you don't need to make a cent from your dental practice. That answers that question. You were in a great situation. You didn't move your standard of living. You guys don't have 5 kids running around. Like,
no,
you were able to just keep cruising at the dental student lifestyle with the same salary. So everyone's situation is going to be different there.
Absolutely.
The second one was you had enough clinical confidence. You had enough entrepreneurial experience, and you had more than enough practice management knowledge. Which I think the entrepreneurial experience and the practice management knowledge are 2 separate things.
For sure.
And you had just enough of those things, and you had to painfully learn the clinical side. So this was great. I think we answered those questions. We don't need to beat that horse anymore.
No. One thing I want to touch on, I really like that you said enough, because I think in life, if you're waiting until something's optimized before you take action, you're never going to take action, right? Like if you wait till you're an expert in practice management, you're never going to do it. If you wait till you're an expert in dental implants before you place one, you're never going to do it. So I think that's a really good distinction.
You had enough, and you made the leap.
Go fly, bird.
So now I want to ask, and this is like opinion, some of this here real quick. This is like Andrew's brand of this. You can find acquisitions in any market, from the most expensive markets to the most affordable markets. Mm-hmm. Having done dentistry where you are, would you go rural, suburban, metro, looking for a dental practice?
Oh, you're going to hate this answer. It depends on your vision.
Agreed.
Yes.
I'm asking you, what's your vision?
I would go on the very edge of suburban. Okay. I went urban because that's the opportunity that I found. If I had to go do it again tomorrow, I would go right on the very edge of suburban. Okay. And here's why. One, patient demographics. I did find a pocket of opportunity demographically in my place for patients. But I still have to be like competitive and market with other people. And that's a big pain point I'm solving right now is patient acquisition. I didn't have to do that for the first 2 years. Now I'm trying to do that. The other big thing in an urban setting that I don't think we talk about enough is like the cannibalization of dental staff. Your hygienists and your assistants and your front desk have 30 other offices within a 30-minute drive they can go work at. And so it makes hiring people out of dental really hard because they're only going to come for a big pay raise. They're constantly in today's world, people don't stay at jobs as long. Yep. And so that's been a bigger pain point for me than I feel like the patient acquisition is knowing that there's so many dentists in the area we're all desperate for staff these days. That's been a big deal.
And the grass is always greener for your team members.
Yeah, we had one of those lately and they wanted to come back. It was a very unfortunate situation for them.
It happens. And I've had that happen. And with how desperate some offices are getting, they're throwing absurd numbers out there.
Yeah, and some are doing shady stuff. It's just, it is what it is, right? And so that's a consideration, right?
Yeah.
Are those things. So
Pick your problems.
pick your problems.
But you chose an opportunity, like you said, you would look for this, but you were open to opportunities and you found something more urban, and it was a great opportunity. I don't think you regret,
No,
even
not
though
at
with
all.
those challenges that you have right now, those are just the problems that you have to solve for, which no matter what you do, you
Yeah.
have those.
If anyone told me I have an office in an urban setting that I can double in year one, should I not buy it because I want to be real? I'm like, you're stupid. Go get the net worth gain. Like, go buy the practice that you can grow.
You can go flip
quickly.
it in 2 years. And then
Yes,
go
if you want to. You have
rural.
options, right?
Yeah.
I would never. People will grow, rule a lot. I wouldn't, just because you can't get, unless your vision is to be the single doctor and grind yourself into the ground, working hard, doing clinical dentistry and making a lot of money. If that's you, go rule. If that's not you, I would pump the brakes just a touch, because associate retention in those areas long term is
Pretty
hard.
brutal. You got to part. A lot of times you got to partner.
You got a partner. You got to find somebody from the area who wants to
Yeah.
come back and live there, which my generation, less and less. Like we love our coffee shops and brunches and stuff like that in the city, right?
Yep.
I mean, I just had a conversation with a classmate who actually, I grew up an hour outside the city, which I don't consider very country or rural. But I had a classmate who went there, is working there, and she's texting me going, hey, when you gonna have an associate job? Like, she's 18 months in trying to get back into the city. I'm like, yeah, this is the cycle that those practice owners face.
Constant. So, every year or two, turnover. And
if you're okay with that, that's cool. Most dentists aren't. It's a lot of stress.
It's a lot of stress.
Some declining.
Team members, the risk, I think one of the hard, like, I don't know if we've said this directly, but one of the most stressful parts of dentistry is the fact that team members can leave, and it's a major hole that it's hard to plug quickly and efficiently. That, like, there is practice risk in team members, and especially doctors.
Yeah.
And it's just a stressor of like, oh crap, if this person leaves, that person leaves, it's really painful to replace them.
When I was a dental student, didn't know any better. I'm like, all these doctors are out here responsible. These old doctors are grossly overpaying their staff, and they're not making wise financial business decisions. I get it now. They make enough money. They treat it like their personal and practice financials are just intertwined, and they would rather take home $15K less a year and have the stability and not having to go find people. I see why they do it, man. I see why these older docs just grossly overpay their staff. And I want my staff to be well compensated. Don't hear me wrong. Like, I put in pretty great incentive structures in for them. But yeah, like, that's just a big stress point, and your life is better. Like, you don't want to be like, everybody dreads the text at like 6 a.m. on a Thursday morning, like, who's calling in and quitting, you know?
Yeah.
So 100%.
Yeah. And I think the longer you go through it, the more that, like, it both doesn't go away, but also you come out on the other side. You know what? We found someone better, and you build the culture and the environment where people want to work and all of that. So getting off on a tangent here, I want to come back. I like these little, like, micro decisions, because this is when someone is a pre-owner and they haven't bought yet. They have to make timeline decisions. They have to make market decisions. They need to decide where to look and how to look. And so I think we've hit timeline. Now we've hit kind of demographic, areas, broad, topic there. But I want to talk about how to look. So from you, this is the coolest part. You did this yourself, but you also have helped so many pre-owners through the podcast over the years, through the mastermind. What would be the top 3 ways to look for a dental practice that you would recommend?
Richard, I think in today's environment, when we were recording 5-6 years ago, there was a lot of group practices out there that were still for sale. There were ADOP practices for sale that were cash flowing. With the way consolidation has changed in our industry, that's less and less common.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not out there, but it's hard to find. So most of the practices that you're going to see listed on market are going to be definitely less than 6 ops. They're probably going to be, the average dental practice brings in about $700K in revenue, those sorts of things. So I think with how things are, it's a volume game these days. I think mailers are great. I think networking within dental is great, but I think more than anything, it's just like the law of averages coming back to you. I think you just got to put as many opportunities and feelers out there however you can.
Okay.
So for me, yeah, that was networking, that was mailers, that was local supply reps, which ultimately was my golden ticket. And so I think it's just, and it depends on your area. If you're in a more competitive area, you're going to have to figure out more ways to be creative.
Yep. And so I like the distinction there of if your goal and your vision is a solo to super solo, productive solo, smart solo, whatever we want to call it. If you're looking at a 5-op practice, you've got a lot of options because
Yeah.
those are not the practices that are selling and getting scooped up by DSOs. If you are looking at a practice that currently has 7+ operatories that can fit 2 doctors in it, you have to, number one, be more patient, and number two, do everything and do it sometimes for a long time and a lot of it. So, like you said, mailers, networking, supply reps, and brokers, and like local dental society listings, CE clubs that are local, talking with the
Yeah.
specialists. Like,
And the distinction that we're making is you have to find an off-market deal,
yes,
essentially.
yes.
On-market stuff is going to be kind of tougher unless it's more rural.
And I will say too, yeah, more rural, you can find bigger practices, and talk with your brokers, because your brokers sometimes know, and I've done this. I did this last year when I was thinking about buying another practice in the fall, before I started my men's group. And there are brokers who know people who don't want to sell to a DSO.
Yes. And they
So,
know
so
people
those
who are a few years out and things of that nature too.
Exactly. And so there are times where if you know what you want a larger practice, you articulate that to a broker. They respect that, like, okay, you know what you're doing, and I'm not going to embarrass myself showing you to a potential listing. They can connect you with people that maybe haven't listed yet because they're like in that process, but could meet that need. So I wouldn't write off brokers completely if you're looking for something larger, but just know you're going to need to gain the trust of the broker by being a not mature buyer, but like a wise buyer and a greater experienced buyer. You can articulate yourself. You've got a plan,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Not a D1 student that's like, hey, broker, show me what you got.
I want a big one. Can you,
We
can you make a big
get we
one?
get those posted in the Facebook group sometimes. It's like, oh, so what should I be doing? This and this and this. And it's like, okay, so where are you? Like, oh, I just got accepted into dental school. It's like, oh, that's cute. Hang in there,
Yeah. Yeah. I like that distinction. What you're looking for determines how hard you're going to have to work for it.
The one I didn't mention too, because in my head it falls into mailers, but it's Facebook groups, digital mailers, like digital marketing. So, back in the day, we just sent a bunch of postcards to every practice in town. These days, there's groups out there that there are hundreds of thousands of dentists in that you can post, hey, I'm going to this area and I'm looking, It's a little bit better if you're an associate, but I've seen people find practices on those Facebook groups.
The challenging part in that is the more public it is, the more likely your employer is to find out.
Yes. Sometimes you got to post anonymously, or if you're a dental student, I'd post as a dental student. Everybody thought it was the coolest thing that there's a D4 who was being this proactive. So that post got a lot of traction.
Cool. And because I was thinking, like, you could even make a social media account about it, but then if your current employer finds out, it's not great.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, so now we talked about the how. You worked with buyer's representation.
Yep.
Between pulling the numbers, we've talked about the things to pull. What's the timeline? How long would you expect from when you start? I think this is a good expectation overall. Timeline from when you start looking, what do you need to mentally be prepared for until when you find something? And then timeline it takes to put an LOI in and then to get to the closing table. Because some people don't understand the timeline and they get frustrated when it's been 3 months and they haven't found something.
Yeah. So once you've found one that you think you want to buy and you've been connected somewhat, if it's an off-market deal, 6 months. On market deal, you might can get done in 3 months because there's a broker who's pushing it. But if you're dealing with an off market deal, you're probably dealing with an older dentist and you're asking them for their reports out of their PMS that they don't know how to pull.
Right.
And dentists are busy. And so you're going to have some you're going to say, hey, will you give me this, breakdown? And you'll get it a week and a half later. Right?
And it's the wrong report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had some of that. And your mileage there is going to vary. So,
and that's once you've found something.
Finding it, man,
it's like 1 to 18 months.
It could be like a 3-month deal or a 2-year deal. Who knows? I mean, a lot of times it's just right place, right time.
Yep.
We can try to plan all this out, but at the end of the day, sometimes life just takes you where life takes you, and there's no explaining that.
And the great part about that too is keep stockpiling cash, keep preparing for the future, be patient, know that the universe or God or whatever, there's things happen when they're supposed to, and everyone's supposed to go on the journey they're supposed to. If you believe in that, 100%. Lean into whatever gets you across the patience line.
All things happen for a reason. And I'll say this too. Your life is not going to get 1,000,000% better when you own a practice.
Right.
So don't buy into this fallacy of oh, my life will be perfect when.
Right.
Because you're going to get into practice ownership and you're going to be dang, life is way more stressful than it used to be. I like what I do. And guess what? I finally get compensated appropriately for it. So that's cool. But sometimes I find myself reminiscing to life as a dental student was not that bad. It was pretty chill, So don't buy into that. Worst case scenario, you're a dentist making multiple 6 figures as an associate if you're in the right practice. And if that's your worst case scenario for a few years, it's pretty good.
So then once you've found the practice is that's right where the moment of BRS evaluation, getting to the closing table, getting help, getting coaching, philosophy around having been through this now, would you do anything differently with negotiations? Because I think this is something
that one's definitely interesting. So, our long-time advice has been don't piss off the seller that you need the goodwill from by lowballing them on their practice. I still think that's good. No one likes dealing with, I had somebody in my life who was buying some used shelves from me, and they may or may not be a referring relationship for me in the community, and they lowballed me on the shelves, and I'm like, you just stepped over dollars to pick up pennies, dude. Nobody wants to work with that kind of person. But at the end of the day, the value of something, it is what it is. That was the situation I was in. I had a practice that was, and I want to get into this in a minute, when is the fixer-upper too far gone? Because I learned some valuable lessons on that front. But the practice was was declining year over year. It had gotten down to about $550K in revenue, and we assessed a value to it that we thought was fair. It was nobody won, no one pulled one over on the other person. But even once we did that, that was about $60K less than what the seller originally had in his head. Now, we always know what the seller has in their head isn't always based in reality.
Right.
But it still affects their emotions around it. You want them to feel good about this deal. Yeah. And so how we approached it, and this is where, for me, buyer's representation helped. I mean, it's good for anybody. I knew my numbers. Suzanne helped confirm what I already knew. It was worth it to have that somebody who didn't have any bias, because it's your life on the line. You are 100% biased. You think everything will work out perfectly. And so I tend to see people go after these opportunities that they're like, hey, this will work if this goes right and that goes right and this goes right and that goes right. And you're like, bro, just don't, So, but where BRS helped me was they were able to give me a valuation, and we put together this really great little spreadsheet on how we evaluate a practice, what we were taking the factors into account, and how we arrived at this valuation. So I just went to my seller. He kind of old school negotiated me, because I asked him, I was like, how much do you want for it? Kind of knowing that the guy who had listed it, he had gotten somebody to do an evaluation on it. And he said, I don't know. What were you thinking? And it's kind of this old school negotiation tactic of whoever speaks first loses. Yeah. And so finally I brought him a number. And once again, that number is about $50K, $60K lower. And he looked at it. This guy's older. He ponders on things. So it felt like an eternity of him looking at this sheet. It was probably 5 minutes. But he goes, well, I was really thinking more than that, but I can't argue with this sheet. It's very clear and spells out exactly how you came to the conclusion you did. And I blamed it on the company who was representing me, which was really great. And the win-win that we found, because he just had this number in his head, he needed to feel good about this. The guy had been a dentist till he was 80. I'm sure he's fine, right? But he said, would this include, because I wanted to buy the AR, and we recommend buying the AR, if nothing else for administrative ease. And he said, does this include the AR? I said, no, sir, that's just the value of the practice. I am interested in buying the AR. And the value of the AR was about another 40, 50K. And guess what? That got him to his number where he felt good about the deal.
Right. I love that. I love that you let the numbers do the talking for you. And all at the end of the day, it's hard to argue with that. And you can feel fair and they can feel at least somewhat good about it. And the point I was about to make was, at the end of the day, knowing what you know now, how this turned out, you would have paid another 50 to 60K for it because you knew the potential. But the banks, it wasn't worth that. And
well,
the banks and all of that and the fairness are there too.
Here's the thing too, that, so there's a lot of lessons I learned along the way. Not everything was just like Andrew had, like, futuristic vision. You have this whole thing was going to play out. There's some things that, looking back, I wish I would have taken into consideration. So would I have paid more? Probably. But I grossly underestimated how much money I was going to have to put back into the facilities and equipment in this place. You buy an underperforming practice, that doctor hasn't invested in infrastructure in probably a very long time. And there were some things that I knew. Like, this guy was filming paper charts, so I knew I was going to put computers in there. I knew I was going to put sensors in there. I didn't know that he had not bought hygiene instruments in 15 years, and I'm trying to recruit new hygienists to come scale teeth with dull instruments. I didn't know that none of their Cavitrons really worked properly. I didn't know that, like, I knew the place looked bad with, like, wallpaper and stuff, but I didn't know that the building was in such bad shape that every improvement project I would choose to do for the next 18 months would go over time and over budget, because there had been so much deferred maintenance. I didn't know that the guy had not put insulation in the attic in 15 years, and that the first summer I would be in there, we'd be all sweating because the place had not had that many bodies in it in a long time. So, like, looking back, yes, I mean, I would have paid more, but, like, there's some days I'm like, man, I just, like, forked out several grand for insulation in this building that I don't own, you know, and I will probably outgrow, wink, wink, in the near future. And yeah, that just kind of stinks, but it's the cost of doing business. And the reality was, do that or not be able to, like, recruit team members because they don't want to come work in a dump. New patients don't want to come. The existing patients were fine because they'd been there for 30 years. But so, that's one thing that I feel like back in the day we didn't do a good enough job of talking about. But to be fair, I think the average dental practice out there isn't how mine was. I think it's got, like, good enough and you don't have to put all the money into it. I did early on, but my situation was a risk reward. Like, it was underperforming and I had the patient base to turn it around in a big way, but there was a lot of, like, downside and things of that nature with it.
And this is where it's like you had to do 25-30% of the startup cost in terms of all the equipment build out of what it would be to start that practice.
And not even to and I'm still in a facility that I could only get really, like, 7 or 8 chairs, but I'm severely limited by parking and bathrooms and other things, right? So it's not even like I'm doing the cost of a startup in a forever home, I'm not going to say too much on here, but so I mean, the other part of that I'll talk about is the patient-based demographics. So one thing that saved me a lot too was I had an older patient base who on average needs more dental work. And I bought this underperforming office. So guess what? There's a lot of pent-up demand and a lot of undiagnosed dentistry. And I capitalized on that in a very big way. It was a net positive thing. But that same demographic that was a bit of a saving grace is also tougher because as I'm trying to grow the practice externally now and have it operate the way I want to, that same demographic of people are very resistant to change. They're very resistant to new policies. And I think that's why some ended up at this office. There was very lax collection policies in place. There was like, hey, you can cancel on us and we're going to give you a slot again tomorrow. So we're going to train you not to respect our time. And so as I've had to come in there and get rid of that, the attrition we've seen in our practice has been higher than average, like very high. And it's been fine. Like overall, I had an excess of patients coming in, so I'm still doing fine. But we thought we had a head start on like growing a third hygienist and getting to a new doctor. And we're seeing now like the 18-month attrition come around. And I'm like, yeah, there's just a lot of people who didn't want the change because it didn't suit them anymore. And guess what? I would be mad too if I could show up and get dental work for free and couldn't anymore. I'd probably go elsewhere too.
I actually have to pay for dentistry, and there's far more of it in my mouth than I expected. I don't like this.
So I had to go through a little bit of a purging. And most of my patients are great, Richard. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there was a fringe, 20% of the practice, 30% of the practice that were like that. And some came around, some didn't. And then there's some people who probably got, treated by the young dentist, and he wasn't as comfortable giving shots back in the day, and they probably went and found a new dentist, And so those are some of the things that I learned on the back end I didn't foresee, but because I bought right, I wasn't, hurting because of it per se.
Well, and this comes back to what you just said is what we're going to have to wrap it up on. But this concept of buying right is what allows you to weather the inevitable bumps and also immediately grow rather than immediately struggle. And that's why we're doing our Pathways to Ownership event. We've changed it. We now are offering this first time ever as a free event for those dental students, for those young dentists. You do have to put $159 deposit down. I'm not sure on the number to save your spot, because that's a spot someone else could go to, and you get it back when you show up. But this is because this changes the rest of your life. And we want there to be no excuses for that young dentist, that dental student who's stockpiling cash for an acquisition or a startup. We want them to come get this life-changing information, and they're going to hear from you exactly the strategies of how to buy right. So we've talked about some of these surrounding factors, but the actual practice selection, that's some of the secret sauce. It just takes a long time to talk about this kind of stuff.
So many different things to consider. There's so many places to capitalize on,
And so that's what the event is. So I really hope those who are listening who we're just eating this up.
Man, that's such a cheat code. Like, I would have given anything as a dental student to be able to for free.
Yeah. And that's why I in one of the ads with George, I was like, I'm kind of pissed because
I didn't have this.
Well, not only did I not have this, and it's the spirit of like, we've put out almost 800 hours of amazing free content for years. So in one way, like, actually this is kind of right in line. But also, if someone doesn't do this, between the course being free, the due diligence that can get wrapped into the loan, you're not having to get into ownership. We're making the barrier as low as possible on multiple fronts and be immediately successful. So you have no excuse. If you're listening to this, come hang out with us July 25th, 26th. Come hear from Andrew and George straight from their mouths, their depth of experience, the hundreds and hundreds of dentists that we've helped. And we're going to keep diving deeper and deeper on all these topics. So Andrew, thank you for coming on the show. This has been a delight.
Absolutely, Richard. Always have a really good time. Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. We'll talk to you next time on the Shared Practices Podcast.